turn it over to Michael.
Okay, and away we go. Yeah, it's I can bring a few tools with me by plane, of course, and fixing mistakes would fit in that category quite nicely. Not so much with my workbench. So we'll do the workbench and some of the other bits and pieces. Here, the things that are more portable, I'll bring with me for the in-person portion of our adventure here. So wait a minute, got it. Oh, here we go. Ah, great. Okay. This is my work area. We're looking at right here. My tool cabinet in the behind it. My workbench, by the way, is a standalone object. It's not up against the wall because I like to work from both, essentially from both sides. I'm often clamping things to my my workbench underneath the bench, on top of the bench, and so on. So it's nice to have access all the way around. It is a solid top. It's about 3 inches thick, relatively narrow. It's more of an English style workbench. I did work with a British master designer craftsman, Alan Peters, and so that, in a way, kind of flavored my sense of what a workbench is. So that's, Alan's workbenches are very similar to the ones I have here, with the exception of some of the additions and bits and pieces that I've added over the years. One thing I want to point out right from square one is the height. To the top of the bench, it's 39.5 inches, which is relatively tall. And I'm not a tall guy. I'm about 5'9" or 10, that sort of neighborhood. This bench is at a very comfortable height for me, considering what I do. And considering I've been doing this since 1974, and after so many years, which I think is, kind of, well, not quite 50, but getting there, I have absolutely no back issues, no hip, no ankle, any sort of whatever you want to call those problems that come about from bending over at a bench. So my bench is 39.5 inches tall. And what I'm working on is more often than not way above the bench. So I'm in a nice, comfortable position is what it amounts to. Another thing that's been important for me, at least anyway, and that is the floor. I've always tried to work on a wooden floor. Now, by wood, I mean that it's a concrete foundation underneath, but I've laid sleepers down, which are 2x4s laid flat on 12-inch centers. And then at that point, I put down OSB. OSB, Canada is generally referred to as beaver barf, but that's sheet material with the big flakes on it, painted out with great paint. So, as I'm standing at my bench, as I do pretty much every work day, I'm in a nice, comfortable position, and the floor is kind of springy because I didn't actually fasten it down to the floor. Sorry?
Somebody's not muted.
Whoever's the host needs to mute everybody.
Yep.
Okay. We should point out, though, that if anyone has a question, I am more than happy to answer a question as they come up. So in other words, you don't have to wait till the end. I'm totally incapable of doing that. I'd forget my question. if you have something you'd like to comment on, or you need more information.
Whoops, hang on. Stop.
Michael, looks like you're muted for a second. Someone's working on it.
If you muted everybody, Chip, then you muted him too, so he needs to unmute himself.
Working it, working it. Oh. Gosh, I can't. Oops, wrong.
Chip, if you want to make me the host, I can see it all here and do it.
Ed, we've got it handled. I think what happened is there we go.
I don't know why it's okay. I'm gonna do something. I'm not seeing the right button. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So Michael, if you will unmute your telephone, please, we can continue on.
Every time I try to go hover over.
How's that?
Yeah, it's
Is
fine.
that working for you?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Every time I tried to hover over the microphone, something else would pop up and block it.
So are we again here?
You're good.
Okay, fabulous. So, I was talking about my my workbench here. I do this for a living, so everything has to be kind of practical, is what it amounts to. But the designer side of me says it can't be all willy-nilly. So there is an element of organization that may or may not be obvious to viewers, but from my perspective, this works unusually well. And I'm just going to give you a bit of a tour, simply because I see my workbench also as a tool. So if I start at one end here, I talked about the width. There is a tool tray here and fourth here. All right. It is full of, not to use it too crude a term, but it is full of crap. And I really don't use it, is what it amounts to. It just seems to collect miscellaneous stuff. Maybe somebody else would be more controlled with their stuff, but I don't seem to be able to do that. But at the same time, I also haven't taken it off either. So maybe I'm hoping for a change in how I use my bench. Now, on the front of the bench here, I've had a number of different vices. I'm going to swivel this around a bit here. I started out with a 52.5 record here, which is, the typical woodwork that, made by record that slides in and out and so on. But the jaws essentially were parallel. And I spent some time trying to figure out how to get around that. And I did actually come up with quite a nice solution. And I'll bring that with me when I'm doing the in-person portion of this adventure. And it does allow a standard woodworking vise. There's a nice and simple alteration to it that will allow the a movable jaw to swivel. So you can actually clamp things in usual shapes rather than just simply so what's on here now is a Veritas Tucker vise. They're no longer available, and I'll show you an option here in a few minutes of something that actually does work. It's not as slick and so on, and as beautifully engineered as this Tucker vise, but being able to move it around like so and swivel it like this is, for what I'm doing, an absolute must. And not only that, it gives you a couple of different jaw widths, and including a very small one up here. So for the type of work I'm doing, absolutely essential. Now, at the same time, I'm do cabinet work, and some actually approaching square, but if I'm supporting a larger panel, I've got a post here that moves anywhere along the front of my bench, and the surface of this is in line with my vise here. And then I've got a peg here that I can put pretty much anywhere to accommodate the size of the panel that I'm working on. So,
Michael?
yes,
I've
yeah,
got a question that seems timely now that you're pointing out your column with the pegs.
yeah.
Mark is asking, I have some 6x6 lumber I was going to use for legs for a workbench. Is this
Yeah.
overkill? Your bench seems pretty sturdy with what looks like 2x2s.
They're not, they are. Of course, I'm searching madly for a tape measure. They're about 2 3/4 square. And there is no structure up underneath here, by the way. It's dead smooth all the way over. One of the things that I find incredibly irritating is working on a bench where they've got a thick front, but the body of the bench is much thinner. And it seems to me that every time I want to clamp something to the bench, my clamp is half on and half off that thick leading edge across this side of the bench. So I chose to make the bench the same thickness across the full width. If I was to make a suggestion, the business end of this bench in terms of rigidity is actually this piece down here. That's a full 6 inches, and that is about 2 inches thick, and it's bolted in there. There's like a stub tenon, and then there's a bolt that goes through into a trap nut. And so this thing is a rigid when I'm doing things that require the to be rigid. It's also, I've got levelers on it. So if I need to move it around, I can simply level the thing up as well. Now, underneath here, you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cordless drills, and that's really important for me. Just the nature of how I assemble things and how I make jigs and so on requires that I have easy access to cordless drills, and they're 12 volt, by the way. I really do not like monster 20 volt drills. They're just too heavy. And, I'm a fine furniture maker. So, I'm making little pieces, putting them together. It's not like I'm working on a construction site where I would need the heft and weight and power 20 volt drill. One of the most important tools in my workbench is actually this tool right here. This is a hot glue gun. When I'm designing a piece of furniture and I'm starting to fabricate it, or I'm making models and mock-ups and so on, as soon as the thought of model or jig pops into my fuzzy little gray matter here, I plug my hot glue gun in. One of my lifelong searches is to find the perfect hot glue gun. And this is getting close to it in that the nozzle is replaceable with long, skinny nozzles and one wide, fat one, and so on. But, it's getting there. The problem is it's just too darn big is what it amounts to. But the point I'm making here is that, the real estate on your bench is really, and, I'm happy to devote some space to my hot glue gun. I personally need a power bar right on the front of the bench because I'm often building router jigs and, that sort of thing on my bench. And so that's absolutely essential. And I don't know why I didn't do this sooner, but I worked for 20 years with my clamps away from my bench. I finally put a clamp rack on the end here below the bench. It's not in the way at all, but now I can just reach down and pick up an appropriate clamp. They do, by the way, there's a one hole group that has rubber baby bumpers on it and one hole group that does not. So, subtle detail, but that has proven to be important over the years. Now, over here at a gun stock vise, absolutely an essential tool for me. I'm going to bring this in a little closer. Now, ordinarily, this is, and there are holes in my bench and so on here, where when you buy a gun stock vise, it comes with about a 5/8 diameter thread on it that's about a foot long. And you drill a 5/8 diameter hole, clamp the whole thing down to your bench. And it does swivel quite nicely. But it was always essentially square to the bench. All right. So the jaw here, that's I'm often holding unusual shapes. Like this leg assembly, for instance. Nothing's parallel, nothing's flat, and so on. And the jaws on this gun stock vise, I'm not entirely certain what's on it, but whatever it is, it sticks to wood like you can't imagine. These are not expensive. In fact, Woodcraft comes up with a sale every once in a while at about $110. And if you catch the sale, it's one of the best $110 purchases you'll make. Now, I have done an alteration. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But in any case, my alteration is this: being able to tilt this and move it in different directions. I'm often working on strange shapes. And what I don't want to be doing, here's a Cooper's seat on a back here that I'm working on at the moment. I don't want to be bending over, trying to use my spoke shaves or whatever tool I'm using, when I can simply change this to a point where I can clamp it exactly where I want it. So it's perpendicular like so to where I'm standing. I might be using a block plane on here. And so, the block plane, I want to keep a vertical or horizontal reference to make sure I get exactly the surface that I'm after. So nice and inexpensive change. Now, I did take the big honkin' foot-long bolt off, cut it off and replace the bolt up inside here. And that allows me to, and it's an Allen key bolt, tighten this in so it will no longer swivel if I don't want it to. Like so. I spent a lot of time right at this vise. And so it's got to be 39. It's probably approaching 45 or 46 inches off the ground. So everything I'm working on is up in a nice comfortable height. I mentioned a few minutes ago about changing, altering tools, and so on. I keep in mind that the people making our tools are making them often based on the history of tools. So just simply take a tool like a marking gauge and do something very similar to what's always been done in the past, except the difference is that they will charge you a lot more money than the original version. Just because it's the same as the original size and so on doesn't necessarily make it a good tool. And my favorite example of that, of course, is marking gauge. And Lee Valley makes a marking gauge that looks pretty much like this generic shape. Except I've always found the table on the marking gauge to be too small. It's hard to keep a reference with a small table when you're using a marking gauge. So I've simply made an improvement, and I've mechanically screwed on a larger piece of aluminum that you see here. And here's one that's even larger still. So when I'm working on pieces, I can always keep this surface dead flush to the surface that I'm using as a reference. This one's mechanical. This one here, I made a little bracket here and out of aluminum and screwed it so it actually grips the Lee Valley table nicely here. And all this work, by the way, was done on a little 10-inch Ryobi bandsaw. You'll see in a few minutes. So I am more than willing and often look for improvements that I can make to equipment that is available, but isn't quite what I think it should be. Here's a very, very nice plane from Lee Nelson, plane, spoke shape, sorry. I'm often working, if you go to my portfolios, see a lot of very long, slow, eccentric curves and so on. Do that the way I think it should be done. I've taken a flat spoke shave. I'm trying to get this into focus here somehow. It's a flat spoke shave, but I've taken a file, metalworking file, and I've removed some of the surface of the flat here, which means that now I can do a long, slow, concave surface. Most spoke shaves, if they're curved, it's too curved. And that'll do a tighter curve. Remember, those tools were often used in wagon wheels and so on, carriages and so on, where the curves were much tighter. And that's not the style of work that I do. So I'm altering the tools as necessary to get them to do exactly what I've got in mind. Here's something I use fairly frequently. This is obviously an old tool, but again, I've made an improvement to it. I've simply added a plywood table to it and screwed it in place and replaced the scribe with a 2H pencil lead. You can just buy lead. And so I've got a screw here that tightens it in place. Here, voila. And there's my pencil lead going through here. So I've got several of these because I often keep them set for specific projects. And my favorite for this sort of thing is actually a 2H lid. Okay, so as we move along my bench, you'll see here a couple of cool things, and one is this. And there's a corresponding one on the other end of the bench. And this drops in my dog holes, and one is on the shoulder vise on the other end. And I can clamp vertical panels right to the front of my, right in my front of my work chair. Now, every once in a while I see those. They're not common, but they are designed to accommodate different positions for dog holes across the front of the bench. My bench, by the way, has, of course, the dog holes along here, but there's also a set of dog holes back here. All right, so with the single dog and the shoulder vise here, it presses against a pair of dog holes back here to stop what I'm working on from swiveling as I'm either planing or using a router or whatever it is. Think incredibly securely, to say the least. There's also a pencil sharpener right under my bench. Actually, there's one thing that there's lots of around here, and that is down in this area right here.
Can you redirect the camera?
Yeah.
Can't quite see what you're talking
Okay.
about.
All right. Let's try this.
You okay, Steve?
Thanks, Chip.
Sleeping all day, not doing a thing?
Can you see that? Yeah. Okay.
You all right?
There's, I think you can see that. You should be able to. Yeah, there's my pencil sharpener. What is this? Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's my pen there. That's handy. There's than trying to draw a fine, sharp line with a dull pencil. I do use wooden pencils, and my favorite is a 2H by the way for my in the workshop, and that's the same location. You can see the hot glue gun is right next door. Paint scraper on the other end here. All right, and a bench brush and another paint scraper. When I'm doing jigs, which, I'm often known as a jig kind of guy, I keep a here upside down in a hole in my bottom of my shelf here, as you see right there. And right behind it is a little bit of a product called wax lit, and I won't go into that now, but it's a glue resist that I'm a huge fan of. Some of the things on our topic is I huge fan of dovetails, and I often cut my dovetails on the bandsaw, as you see here. This piece is a little over 2 inches thick here. This portion is cut on the bandsaw using bandsaw jigs. And what you're looking at here is kind of a sample corner. Both these parts are tapered and so on. They were much wider. big honking pieces of walnut. I just wanted to make sure my layout was the way it should be and so on. So my bandsaw jigs to cut this portion of the joint. The mitered portion, if I can pull this apart. Eventually. There we go. This portion of the joint, by the way, is done on a rudder jig with a straight bit, and then the actual dovetails are cut out with, paired out with chisels. And just while we're talking about things like hand tools and so on, I've got this surface all cut out on the bandsaw, and I am cutting right on the line, by the way. And it terminates, the cross cut here is off the scribe line by 64th of an inch, somewhere in that neighborhood. And what I want to do is to be able to drop my chisel absolutely dead square to the surface. I do not undercut at all. Everything is done dead square. And to do that, I often use these shop little squaring fixtures here that will clamp right up tight to my scribe line. And the bandsaw work is so close to the line, it just simply takes my chisel. I just press the scribe line and push it down with the palm of my hand to peel off that small, tiny layer of wood to get a nice, clean, square surface at the end of the socket. Now, I'm about to teach a class on cutting dovetails on the bandsaw. So some of the jigs that I would ordinarily have here are on a site where I'll be teaching. But this essentially is what this is one of the jigs I would be using here at my bench. And I also want to point out that there's sandpaper on the back of this, and it's not sticky back. It is glued on with white glue, so that when I'm pressing my chisel down into the wood here, this thing is not sliding out of position. That would ruin all the care I've taken up to that point. So for me, that's quite an important step.
Michael,
the
I
quick
got a
question.
question. The jig has a bird's mouth on it. What's the function of that bird's mouth?
The jig has a bird's mouth.
Your guide for your chisel. that
Oh,
you're
I
just
see.
holding.
Yeah. Okay, this. Great question. Now, I have to be able to clamp this thing not only to the part, but to my bench as well. And so this clamp here will go all the way in, like so. So can you see that?
Yes. Actually, you moved the
Almost.
camera away.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Not any better?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see the clamp now is secure all the way into the surface here. Without that, you'd need a much bigger clamp, which would be awkward and so on. So by cutting this little bird's mouth, as you mentioned here, I can get a smaller clamp in exactly where I need it. There's, the class I'm about to teach, I've made a number of these that are longer and so on. And ordinarily they're hanging up on the wall. above the window in front of my my workbench. Over here is where I do my sharpening. Okay, whoops, sorry. Like so. And maybe I can do this from this side. If this is going to work for us. Except I'm standing in the way. Can you see what's going on here? Yeah, not bad.
And we can
Okay,
edit this
so this is my sharpening area here. There's whetstones in here. There's all kinds of stones that have been collected over almost a beautiful collection of hard Arkansas oil stones and so on. And then my favorite collection of water stones. But it's right in front of a window, and I'm doing most of my woodwork during the day, and the window comes right in from this direction as I'm standing over here. So there's no shadow and so on getting in the way. I'm a huge card scraper person. There must be a dozen or more card scrapers, a variety of thicknesses and so on. Here's a diamond plate here. And after I've with a file, a smooth single cut bastard file, then I'm going to move over to my oil stones here. And I've got this block of wood here, sorry, this block of wood right here. And this has been with me since 1974, and it is absolutely square. And so after this has been filed, I'm going to hold this down like so, square, like so, to my stone here, do dead square. And then I'll put that aside, that a wooden guide. That's a piece of Brazilian rosewood. And here's another piece of Brazilian. And I'm going to lay this down and keep this thing absolutely dead flat on the surface of my oil stone with this block of wood here. And I'll do all four sides. So they are absolutely perfectly square at that point. So this would go on here like so. Flip this over, do this side here, and do my other two sides, and that is now a nice square surface. The next step, of course, is the burnish, which I won't go into. That's more of a on-site demo, but now press that with my burnishing tool here, stand it up, and because there's so little effort required after this has been burnished flat, and I don't want to do it here, but I can actually hold this in my hand and compress the metal dead square, and then I'm simply going to drop the handle 2 degrees, lift the handle 2 degrees, and bada bing, bada boom, I'm good to go with that. So the whole process takes about 2 minutes, and you've seen the surface of my workbench. That card scraper with that process will card scrape that whole surface before it has to take another 2 minutes to refresh the card scraper. I use this card scrapers, and they're typically very flexible card scrapers, like the one I'm holding here. All right, because this allows me to wrap the card scraper right around the curved part that I'm working on to remove any of the tool marks that have been left from spoke shaves or rasps or whatever tool I've been using. Okay, so let's continue on with our adventure here. I'm making my way out with the tripod, and I'll look at our list. Now, over here, we have interns that come in from around the world. And one of the things they invariably leave with is this right here. It takes a little, just a couple of days. And invariably, they'll come to me and go, wow, this is a fabulous trick. We're often working in other materials. You've got to dress the edge of some MDF, or you're working on a very, very tiny surface that is just impractical with a block plane. So at that point, we use hard sanding blocks. You really do not want to use your spoke shaves and block planes and number 5s and 6s and so on with things like the edge of MDF. Sanding block is by far the better tool. So what you're looking at here is a jig that takes 8 pieces of MDF or particle board cut 2 1/4 by 5 1/2. And when you put 8 of them together in the little jig here, and then put the wedge in, so those 8 pieces are held dead tight together. We spread glue on the surface and then put our sandpaper on top of that. I'll let the glue dry. The quick and thick is perfect for this, by the way. You'll let it set for about 15 minutes. You take that out and flip it over and cut the pieces apart. So what you're really doing is cutting the back of the sandpaper. So you end up with things that look like this. All right, like so. As you can see, we've got 80 grit, 120, 180, 150. These are all 80s I've got set in here. But the number of times I've run into interns and we talk about how wonderful that little trick is for dealing with, when you're making patterns and so on, is really quite amazing. Now on the floor here, in a way, this is kind of a similar topic. On the floor right here is a box of sanding calls right here. All right, and you can see they are kinds of different shapes and curvatures and so on. Like so. Some of them are, here's one that's actually compound here. My favorite sandpaper of all time is actually a carborundum product, and it's called Premium Red. And this is an example of it right here. As it starts to wear down, it turns red, which is kind of convenient. It's telling you that it's no longer sharp or doing what it could do. So in any case, you're cutting sandpaper to size and so on. And to do that, we use, I'm sure you're surprised at this, but we can take a piece of sandpaper, and I've just got a piece of scrap here. We can put this underneath here, and I am now cutting this 2 1/4 inches wide, like so. So I've taken a quarter sheet and I've just made 2 1/8-inch wide pieces. Now, all those sanding blocks, there's Here, by the way, is an unusual shape. It's a clamping call faced with sandpaper that you see here. Very specialized. All that sandpaper has to be, and we're often cutting it on this. This hangs on the wall. This one was made in December '04 because the one I made in 1974, the hole had worn through to the point where it would no longer hang up. And so, you know, that's a pretty good indication that it's a tool that is used quite frequently. It's also a line to cut sandpaper in quarters, one way, and then the other way using the step that you see here. And if I need to cut something at an angle, I can do that. I can slip this underneath here. And cut it at an angle like so. The sandpaper is expensive, and so you know, I'm not using it in a willy-nilly manner, in a very specific way, and so on. So I get the maximum effort out of the sandpaper that we're using. Okay, I'm looking at my list here. Okay, now I may have pointed this out in a previous, might have been in the last one, but I'll just do it briefly again, because this, in my opinion, is, it's a great tool, and it gets even better. I didn't go into this part of it, but this is what's referred to as a bevel boss here. No longer made by Bevel Boss. Now it's made by a variety of other companies. But the beauty to this is that it measures in quarter degrees. When this was the company to say how much I love the tool. And then I asked them, well, what about the rest of the numbers between 50 and 90? And there was a bit of a hesitation in the answer. And he said, well, you don't use those numbers that often, so we just left that out. But if you simply do this, this is part of a square made by Lee Valley. It fits absolutely perfectly on this bevel boss. So if we wish to measure a small angle, and I'm just going to set this willy-nilly, and we can put this on here. And this was set to 9 1/4 degrees, like so. All right, so kind of a handy tool for that. Just looking at my clock here. Okay, all good. Now we're going to, if anybody has any questions, just pipe up, and I'll do what I can to answer them, answer any questions. Now on my list here, we've got cone spacers, and they are here. Hopefully I can get this crossed easily.
Michael, you're about 50 minutes in so far.
Okay, good. I'm often working with curves, and as you know, what you can't do is just simply make a mark and move your curve, and it will never give you a parallel line. It's like trying to stack cereal bowls that, you know, the shape changes as you stack anything. So we're just going to draw on the back of this. And not as though I spent a tremendous amount of time doing this all at once, but this is something that I use quite frequently, and it's this. So if I want to take that, create a curve here, a shape that is, pick a number, 3/4 of an inch thick here, then I'm going to draw my line here like so. And then I do have these cones, this cone of MDF that you see here. And these are in 1/16 of an inch increments. So here's 3/4, 13/16, 7/8, 15/16, 1 inch, and so on, to whatever size I need. So here's one at, here's the 3/4 inch here. I stick my pencil in the middle here, and I can draw that around like so. And it'll be a 3/4 of an inch offset for that shape. Now, if I wanted, pick a number, 7/8 or 15/16, I can do exactly the same thing. Stick my pencil in there and run it around like so. So this is the cone that's been created over the years. Now, on the wall of the shop up here, if you can see this disc up here, right at the tip of my finger.
Yep.
There's some that are 4 inches, 4 1/8, 4/4, and so on. So over the years, I've made a number of those, and they're all done with this tool. I hope I can find whatever I just dropped. But in any case, it's all done with this tool in the drill press. So what I'm doing is measuring from here to the inside of the cutter right here, and that gives me, in this case, the 3/4 of an inch space between the inside of the hole and the outside of this disc. I use those a lot, is what it amounts to. One of the design engineers from Lee Valley was in here, saw using washers to do the same thing in smaller parts. And he said, boy, that's interesting. And not too far after that, I saw Lee Valley come up with a very expensive brass washers that were doing the same thing as the washers I was using, out of my my junk drawer. Okay, I just put my piece of paper. Oh, I put my piece of paper down. I just turned it over. There we go. Okay. Now, one of the things we'll do, if you're interested, for the in-person portion, is a present on drawing. It'll just take an hour or two, or whatever you wish to devote to it. And it's this. When I've spoken with Chip, behind Chip's head on the wall of his office is a perspective chart. And I can show you how to do illustrations. You do not, absolutely not, have to be an artist. All you have to do is be able to remember the number 5. And what that means is, this is a chart here. And each one, these are pre-printed charts, by the way. And I won't go into the full explanation. But what I've got here is a chart. And what it does, it allows me to draw an idea in 3 dimensions to true scale, to true size. So here's a variety of dressers that I had drawn to show a client. And so all as I'm really doing, these dressers, by the way, were 20 inches deep. They were 46 inches long and 34 inches tall. I drew a crate, like just the outline of the object. And then I filled the object in after the crate had been done. So what I'm working on is tracing paper, so I can see through the tracing paper. Now here's one here. This is a project for the Governor General of Canada. And so here's one of the original box. You can see the box drawn here. And then I've started to fill the box in according to the shape that that I was after. And that, where'd it go? The French curve that we were using just a few minutes ago, same French curve, by the way, I've just flipped it over. I can draw the curves that I'm after using the French curve. I just simply have to match up the surface that I'm after. Now, one of the tricks to this is, if you use a hard pencil and it's a straight edge, then it looks like a mechanical drawing. But there's a nice little trick that I learned, and it's this. You'll notice I'm not using a snappy French curve. I've cut a French curve on my bandsaw, used an older bandsaw blade, and I took a couple of teeth and I just sort of tweaked them with a pair of pliers. So the surface I'm getting is as kind of a nice sort of wiggliness to it, which implies that this is an illustration, a hand-done illustration, rather than a mechanical, something that's horribly hard edge and mechanical. So it doesn't really show that well here. But you can see that the lines are just, they appear as though they're gestural rather than hard edge. So, it just makes it looks like you kind of know what you're doing when you really don't. So here's the one that was actually for the client. All these drawings, by the way, were done over top of one grid that I simply did variations over top of, like so. Did a bit of hand shading and so on. I've taught this as it was either a 2-hour class or a class in the morning and a class in the afternoon. And Chip took the class, and there is to be a follow-up class that shows you how to shade shade whatever it is you're drawing to get a 3-dimensional wood-like quality.
Michael, I've got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
You promised that with the perspective chart, we just had to remember the number 5.
Yeah.
You haven't forgotten that, have you? Okay.
No. Okay.
Good.
But yes, I had. So thank you for reminding me. The grid that we're looking at here, right here, you can imagine this looks like floor tiles here. And each one of those floor tiles is 5 inches. So if I said that the chest of drawers here was 45 or 50 inches long, I can draw that distance by following the grid. So the 0 point here is the back corner of the object in this case. And what I've done is the heavier red grid here was 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And if this thing is 50 inches long, then we can go 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. And the height is measured on the vertical measuring line here. And this piece is 34, 35 inches tall. And so right here, these numbers that you see here, those are 5-inch increments. So I'd go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. That is the height, the back corner of my, my object. So the beauty to this is I have written an article for Fine Woodworking. I think it was in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, that goes through this. But doing it in person and having me be able to lean over your shoulder and help you make the connections for the various lines that you'll need to draw your object is way easier than trying to sort it out by reading the article in the magazine. You want to speak to Chip about that. Chip was drawing a table, if I'm not mistaken, either weeks or a couple of months afterwards, and would send me drawings, and I would make comments on those drawings, so that he was able to get the scale and the proportion and so on exactly the way it could be. But what it does is it allows anyone that has, most people consider they have no artistic talent, without a huge amount of, skill, you can go ahead and draw a 3-dimensional image of what it is you're proposing to a spouse or perhaps a potential client. Now, one thing I have learned over the years is I will never, ever, ever do a computer-generated drawing and show that to the client for 2 reasons. And very briefly, it is that anyone that looks at that drawing can say, "Oh, that's very nice. But what does it look like if it was longer, taller, wider, shorter?" Knowing that you can just press a few buttons and you can look at a variation. That invites the person into the design process, and that's not always a good thing. The other thing is these drawings are a little fuzzy, and it gives me more latitude. Like the last thing I want to do is show someone a computer-aided drawing that looks exactly the way it's going to be. You do a drawing, then you start on the project and decide, gee, I want to make some changes here, but it's quite different than the computer-generated drawing. So I find working in this manner, being able to use a pencil effectively gives me more control. And also there's an inherent more artistic sort of content rather than doing this on a computer screen. For me at least anyway, what we do is all about a control of your mind and your hands, all right? How to manipulate your tools and so on. And part of that manipulation is learning how to manipulate a pencil. Learning how to use a pencil effectively isn't really all that much different than learning how to use a carving gouge. But using a computer and a carving gouge, I fail to see the connection there. Was that a question someone had?
Yes, one of the, it was a question about that chart you're using. He
Yeah,
called
and the
it
number
something.
5. And I'm going to just put a plug in here for anybody who has not seen one of Chip's drawings in the recent past. Next time you catch him in the shop, ask what he's up to and take a look at his drawings. They're very expressive and inspirational. So if Michael Fortune gets some of the credit for that, thank you.
Just absolutely an excellent student. Wow. And it's always a treat to continue the conversation past the class with anyone. And that goes with photography as well. I often teach how to photograph your furniture. And, I always enjoy a situation where somebody starts taking photographs of their work. They'll send me the photographs and I'll give them a critique. In the same way, Chip has done drawings, sends them to me, and I will, give him an opinion on, the things he's doing well, and things that might need a little more work. So the beauty to this is the end of the story is this, that having learned how to use this chart, I no longer have to use the chart. I know how to do a perspective sketch. So, if you've seen any of the jigs any of the drawings I've done, or, a workshop on using a bandsaw or whatever it is, a lot of the illustrations for making the various bits and pieces, those are done strictly freehand without a chart. I've just learned how to do perspective drawing, having learned to use these charts right here.
Michael,
So
let me interrupt just for a second. One of the questions
Sure.
had to do, I believe, with this chart. It was somebody, Ed Swakon, asked about a template. This chart, Michael has arranged to provide these charts for sale. So Michael is now the source of these, and we're going to have some of these out here for the design exploration workshop that comes up. So if someone wants to purchase one, we'll have some available.
And what we've done with these charts, it's more expensive, but I've had them printed on a translucent plastic. And so this gives you a left-hand view of the cabinet. And then if you flip it over, it'll give you a right-hand view of the same cabinet. That's all very confusing just to listen to me say it. But as soon as we start laying drawings out, I'll have some of the class draw a right-hand view, some a left-hand view, and you can see what that means in a very practical manner. Now, one of the other details here is this, having done this for so many years, I graduated from school in '74 and immediately started designing and building furniture. And at that point, here's a good example. Okay, here's a full-size drawing of actually tables that were for the Canadian Embassy in Seoul, South Korea. So there's, a typical plan view of the drawing here. Here's a side leg, but that tells you nothing about the relationship of the parts. And so over here, and I hope you can see it right here, is a freehand illustration of that leg. Here's a freehand illustration right here of what the foot looks like. Here's a freehand illustration of the leg from a different view. So my point here is this: you'll learn how to use the chart, and now that will morph into your ability to think three-dimensionally when you're making something. And while we're on the topic, and we've got all these shapes here. All those shapes require forms to mold, laminates around and so on. But the last thing I want to do is destroy my drawing in order to create the form. So what I use is this, and it's a sewer's wheel. So these are sharp little pointy bits here. And so I can take that and I can any shape that I'm creating here. And when you lift this over, you'll see the little dots in your piece of wood in your pattern material that you can go ahead and cut out on the bandsaw. If it's a shape you're trying to follow, this will follow the shape as well, around like so. So a super useful tool, and you can buy those at places like Joann's Fabrics, if I'm not mistaken. So very useful for creating, doing a drawing, and then going ahead and making a form to bend laminates or whatever, according to what it is you're after. Right over here, and I'll be right back. I did an artist in residency in New Zealand and designed a chair when I was there. And so I did all kinds of sketches, did a full-size drawing, and then of course I had to start building the piece. And so I'd done my full-size drawing, and I didn't want to destroy the drawing, of course, as I mentioned already. So I simply traced around my pencil line onto a piece of softwood, which this is right here, so I could cut that shape out on the bandsaw and keep my drawing intact. And on that note, I'm going to shift a bit here. Out my workbench. And right here is a platform I often use for actually building whatever it is I happen to be making. That's about 36 inches square. It's a torsion box, so it is dead flat. And I don't know if it's showing up on the screen here for you, but there's 2-inch grids around this whole thing. And what is happening right here is I'm making the chair that you see. So what's happening up on this jig here, and this, by the way, the height is specific. It's about 24 inches off the ground. So that as I'm working on, in this case, a chair, I'm still working in a comfortable position, rather than trying to crawl around on my hands and knees as I take various dimensions. But the reason I'm pointing this out is this. Here's the back of this chair right here. This surface here, of course, is totally compound here. And these are two shapes that do not rest against this without hand fitting them. And so what I've done here on the platform, which is right beside my workbench, is I have created a what I refer to as an exoskeleton to hold the structure of the chair in exactly where I want the structure, and I want to hold the back in exactly the correct angle, which on this one is 113 degrees off the horizontal surface here, the floor. So in order to scribe that surface to meet the back here, I'm using this, which is a pencil that I've drilled a hole in it. And now I can lay this thing flat on my back of the chair and have it travel around on all four sides. That'll give me a pencil line. And then I can slide this whole thing out of the way, like so. And I can go ahead and carve these surfaces away, all right, until I get a perfect fit. And rather than this going back differently every time, everything is perfectly controlled by the exoskeleton that you see there. So in behind the exoskeleton, by the way, is a woodworking shaper. There's over here is a collection of grinders and sanders and wire wheels and the rest of it. So this is a busy workshop. A lot going on at any given moment. All right. So what are we at? We're at looks like 20 after 10
Yeah, yes.
of my time.
Your
Yeah.
time. Yeah. You haven't mentioned a light box, the rule, using a ruler as a bow.
Yeah. Okay, that's where we're off to right now. Now underneath my beneath the drawing that I just showed you is this.
Your camera's still on the exoskeleton.
Okay, that's me. I've got to walk over and collect it. Here is my light box right here. So, I mentioned tracing paper and drawing one, drawing over top of another and so on. So I would, at some point, there's a drawing of a table that was done on the perspective grid. And then if I can locate it, here that was done over top of that really sketchy one done on the grid. And there it goes right there. Oh, okay, sorry. That's better. Voila. So that allows me to do a drawing that's, a little cleaner, a little crisper, and so on. But I am using that wiggly edge on the French curve cut out of the eighth inch masonite. So I made this light box in 1974, and it's simply a couple of fluorescent bulbs in here. Now, it's not something that you got to rush out and make, to say the least. A piece of glass or a piece of plexiglass on the backs of two chairs will give you the same effect. It's just that, I do enough of this that having a light box right behind my drawing desk is kind of handy. Which I should point out, this is not my drawing office. Here is my workshop. My drawing office is in a building right next door with really bad to non-existent Wi-Fi. Otherwise, I would have taken you in there. So I've moved my light box out here so you can see just see what that's all about. Now, when I'm doing drawings, I've mentioned that a wiggly French curve. This is what I refer to as my wiggly stick here. One edge, this edge here is not smooth. I've actually taken it to the edge of my workbench and wound a knot out of it, is so that the pencil line you get looks more like a gestural line that might be done freehand. And the other side here is a nice crisp line, should I need that. So as you can see, I've had this wiggly stick since 1986. So it's done some nice service over the years. All great fun. Now I've got to find my list here. Okay, so just to go over what we've done, drawing, I talked about wiggly edges, using a ruler as a drawing bow. And when you can buy drawing bows from Lee Valley Tools. They're kind of expensive. They're 48 inches long, and they'll only go to a certain tight curve before they won't go any tighter. So I brought one in here. Let me go get another one. I'll be right back. Ask questions amongst yourselves. I'll be right back.
Hey, this is Mike. I'm kind of monitoring the questions, and I'm not seeing a lot there. So
Okay.
if you have something that you want to ask Michael, but you don't want to interrupt, put them in the chat.
Okay, I just got another one. I don't know what happened to the other one. It's probably covered in paper. But in any case, here's a shop-made drawing bow. And this one is, in fact, a shop-made drawing bow out of a ruler, like so. So I'm working on smaller things. I can do that, like so. All right, so now I can use any portion of that curve, or here's one that's a little bit. Now the ones from Lee Valley, of course, are carbon fiber impregnated plastic with a snappy strap and the rest of it. The ones that I used before Lee Valley was interested in them had exactly this. It was just a string with a piece of material with 2 holes in it, just like a tent you might have used when you were a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout. It's a nice, simple solution. But Lee Valley thought that they couldn't sell those drawing bows with such a straightforward solution. So they went to the strap that you see on them now, which is way more complicated than this. The ones I use in my shop, I've often taken that strap off and replaced it with the string piece of material with 2 holes in it that you see here.
Those straps sometimes want to fight with me.
Oh yeah, they're kind of awkward, and they're also hard to do a small adjustment. Whereas this, it just seems to me to be nice and straightforward. Okay, so just to make sure we've covered everything: wiggly edges, using a ruler as a bow, light boxes, the sewer's wheel, perspective charts, use of tracing paper, adjustable set squares. I haven't gone into that, and nor have I talked about several T-squares. And, when I'm using a small light table like this, I've just made a short T-square out of MDF, 1/8" MDF. And when I'm doing full size, I'm actually using just a good old fashioned drywaller's square. And, I've got a number of them here. Some of them even adjust the angle, which is kind of handy, but not entirely necessary. All right, so let's move on to the next topic, and that is pleat joiners and domino. Now we're going to try off here a wee bit. I do use let's say I do have a domino, and it lives in a box most of its life. I've since discovered the joys of the panto router. So if I'm doing mortise and tenon joints, more often than not, I'm using a panto router rather than domino. Now, I will use the domino, so I'm not anti-domino, but I like the way the panel router is so easy to set up and so easy to duplicate exactly the same setting, no matter what the angle is, and so on. The domino, of course, is happiest just simply working square, which I don't do that often. But what you're looking at here is a table I've made, and it's one of those cheap 1995 metal, buy at Home Depot or whatever. And I've made an auxiliary table on the top here, and it's suspended off of the surface of the cheap table, so that I can clamp anything I need to anywhere around the perimeter. Now you're going to look at that and go, well, wait a minute, that's awfully small. But having used this for so many years, that's the size that seems to be most convenient. And the reason for that is this: more often than not, I'm in different stops and fixtures and so on, the surface here. And here's a good example here. If I'm working on a very, very large panel, and it might be 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot high, and I'm biscuiting into the edge of the end of the panel, and so the panel is sitting upright here. Let me bring up my other screen in here too. So I can see what you can see. So if you imagine I've got a panel that's 2 feet wide, 6 foot high, how am I going to get secure that panel in place? So obviously I'm not going to hold a 6 foot piece here for our demo. But what I can do is clamp this in place and then simply hold it in place to the face machine with this fixture right here, like so. So nothing's moving around. These machines, biscuit machines, and I don't care what make it is, they were all back in the 1960s, and they were to be used freehand. And if you've used one, you know that you're holding a piece of wood, You're holding the body of the machine with one hand. You're holding the other, the whatever it is you're trying to biscuit into, trying to hold it in place. So between all those different movements and holding positions, it's not a happy relationship, is what it really comes down to. So I've eliminated the error just through not being able to hold everything securely by attaching this right to my table here. And my favorite machine, by the way, happens to be the least expensive biscuit or plate joiner, and that is the DeWalt 15. That I like the DeWalt over the options are the fact that it is easily attached to the table with a bolt here and a bolt here. There's a variety of other options on this. It's a straightforward tool, unlike the Porter cable that has a cable that is kind of more like a Cirque du Soleil performance. This is much more straightforward. What I'm going to do at the moment is this, providing I still have my piece of wood here. Yeah, here we go. What you're looking at here is a table, and these two stripes here are masking tape. And one of the wrinkles with a machine or the domino, and you're trying to get a flush surface here, it's actually can be difficult if you're doing this completely freehand. But with this thing fastened down to the table, we're gonna set our piece that comes in here lined up to our center line right here. This one here is gonna line up to the center line here, like so, sorry. So here's my center line back here. There's a center line on the tool here. And when we align that center in here like this, and you'll see I've got a pencil line here that indicates where the cut is going to be, like so. And when, so this one is dead tight to the table here, all right? This one here is sitting up on the tape. And so what all that means is automatically this surface here, which might be the end grain of your what you're working on here, will be slightly above this surface here by the thickness of the masking tape right here. You probably know that sanding end grain to get it dead flush will take off more material than sanding side grain in order to get it flush. So having this surface here slightly proud by the thickness of sanding tape is going to give you a nice square relationship here, rather than having to sand this surface past this surface to get this nice smooth surface you're after. I've got this machine, so when I turn it on, like so, the vacuum is automatically, the dust is automatically extracted. Now, if I've got a lot of things, I'm going to put a stop in here like so. Clamp that in place. So if I'm doing a lot of these, this type of relationship right here, then this would come in here like so. I can hold this down and simply plunge that in. If it's a bigger piece, then I feel that maybe I can't hold everything down the way I should be able to. Then I've got a variety of these different clamps that I can clamp right to the surface. And that, of course, has sandpaper on the bottom as well, so that when I'm clamping things, things aren't sort of sliding out of place. Now, know if it's going to show, but all the way around the perimeter of this table, there's all kinds of jigs and accessories like so. And these are spacers, so that I can undo these two bolts here, and I can lift this up off the surface. So you're not limited to, generally that's about 3/8 of a center to the center line of the cutter here. You're not limited to that. You could put this up any distance of a combination of spacers that you wish to use. So there's big ones, thick ones, thin ones, all around the perimeter of this this table.
I don't know if you can hear us, Michael, but
Now, yeah.
the frame just froze for about, oh, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually, it's kind of strange. It's been very slow this evening as well. So what I'm holding here are a variety of spacers that I can put underneath the machine to change the relationship between the table and the center line of this cutter, which is ordinarily 3/8 of an inch from the table to the center line of the cutter. Now, this one here is 1/8 of an inch. So now that difference is now a 1/2 an inch. If I stuck that one in, which is 3/4 of an inch, and so that would put the center line of the cutter here at 1 1/8 by using that spacer there. There's a 5/8 of an inch one, which would give me a 1 inch increment between the table and the center line of the cutter. Now, this is where this is. If we're working on a lot of longer parts, then these here, this whole thing might go over to my workbench, and that is a support for either the domino or the biscuit machine. So that surface there is the same as this surface there, and there's another one on the other side, so we can use the left and right along parts on this relatively small table like so.
Michael,
So super useful. Yeah.
can I take you back to the table with the masking tape? There's a question here, and I think I'm having the same problem. Are you saying the end grain is harder to sand, and is that so? If so, why are you having it protrude a little bit?
By the time you get the end grain perfectly smooth, so there is no evidence of however it was cut, you're going to be removing more material than the side grain of the material that it's joined to. So that would be there, and that would be here. So this is up on top of the masking tape, like so. So if you were to not use the masking tape, all right, and if we were to put that joint together, like so, All right. So they were cut absolutely dead identical. They're the same reference, which is the table. By the time you sand this end grain down to the point where it is perfectly finished, you would have had to remove more grain, more end grain than side grain. And at that point, the surface is not perfectly true right at the intersection because you've had to sand this surface more than this surface here.
So,
Yeah.
so, so are you intentionally leaving the end grain proud?
To start, and then it is sanded dead smooth.
Okay.
So it's just proud by the thickness of masking tape. Now, if you want to try this, go ahead and do it both ways. So do it. So you've got this relationship like so, and then do it with this relationship, but with the 2 strips of masking tape here. So put the joint together, glue it together, and sand both surfaces flush. And then take a straight edge and put it across that intersection right here.
Okay.
All right. And you will find that surface has dipped down a wee bit because you've had to sand the end grain in order to get into nice, crisp cut wood fiber.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest maybe we touch base on that with in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. So let's move over. How are we doing? We're kind of
Hey,
close to running out
Michael,
of time.
while you're looking
Yeah.
up your next topic, I had a question
Yeah.
about the table, or excuse me, the chair that you're working on now.
Yeah, yeah.
What type of joinery are you going to use to attach that back onto that custom fitted upright that holds it?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to answer that right now. And I'm going to take my camera off the tripod to do it. And I'm on to go to my Instagram page. And what you will see is
I'm getting seasick.
Yeah.
there you go. All right. Now, those are inset composite materials. And it becomes a decorative detail is what it amounts to. And so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on that one side right here. And there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on that side there. So there's probably 4 here and probably 4 here. Wood screws, number 6 wood screws that go in that through the leg, so they're countersunk. And then those holes, the countersunk hole is filled with these little buttons that I've made here of the composite material. And those little buttons are glued into the hole, the countersunk hole.
Beautiful.
Okay.
So, it's a way of disguising the methods of joining those 2 very dissimilar parts together.
Okay. Thank you. You have about 10 minutes left.
Sorry, say it again.
You have about 10 minutes left.
Okay. So the end of it is, each one of the chairs in this set, they all have a different pattern on the back. And if you look at the photograph, I think there's 3 in a group. The seats are all different as well. So, you know, like there's all kinds of different things happening, perhaps a little unusual. The chairs are not identical. This shape here is different. That shape there is different as well. And of course, the method of attaching it is just and I've got them here, a number 6 square, a number 6 screw, sorry, which has the right size head for those little white things I just showed you a minute ago. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep on going here. I'm going to put you back in a tripod. So I've essentially done exactly the same thing with my dom here. I'm just running around like an idiot here trying to find my outline. Here it is. Okay, so again, very similar to the biscuit machine. If I am doing panel work, you know, it's carefully veneered and so on over a stable substrate and so on. My preference is actually to use biscuits rather than domino. I'm attaching the domino. It comes with 2 mounting holes on the underside here. And so what I've got here are 2 5-millimeter bolts that fasten this thing down in place. But the same thing, the table is available all the way around so that I can clamp any jigs and stops and the rest of it anywhere on the table without it getting in the way. So kind of a nice way to make the domino even more useful. But like I said, you know, I'm using it for more sort of straightforward work. Whereas more often than not, I'm using a panto router because of the ability to do both mortises and tenons with essentially the same setup. I'll be leaving your group and then driving up to do a class in Port Townsend, a 6-day class on making folding chairs. And you can see the folding chairs we'll be making on my Instagram page or post or whatever it's called. You just scroll through and you'll see a walnut folding chair, and all the joinery on that is actually done with a panto router. So not much different between the domino setup and the biscuit machine.
I assume you use the same kind of spacer setup.
Essentially, yeah. And you know, sometimes I'm using it, sometimes I'm not. It just depends on the nature of the materials that I'm joining and the surfaces I'm after and so on. But I'm just pointing out the tape trick because whatever it is you're using, side grain always sands finishes differently than end grain. And so I'm accommodating that with just one layer of masking tape. Any questions? We're going to go through fixing mistakes, and we're going to do things like in person. We're going to drill a hole in the middle of a board, and you can imagine this happening. Attaching a leg to the underside of a tabletop, and you inadvertently bore right through the tabletop. The last thing you can do is just fill it with a plug. And I'm going to show you how to do an invisible mend, just to totally eliminate that hole by setting in a piece of similar wood, and not a plug, but it will be a very, very long, slender boat shape. And the rationale being that as soon as you have a visible end grain showing the way you would have with a plug, then that just kind of magnifies the mistake rather than hiding it. But I'm going to show you how to cut an absolutely perfect long slender patch over that hole. You've been cutting some board off the end of a table, and you've got a whopping great bit of tear out that's traveled down the end of a table. I'll show you how to fix that as well. But we're going to do that in person, because it's kind of nice to be able to do it alongside. A couple of people do it do a repair at about the same time. Any questions on what we've covered today?
I don't see any other questions. This is a reminder that we'll be doing the same thing tomorrow night at the same time. It is a different Zoom link, so go find the email that went out as a reminder from the Guild website that it was the reminder for these two classes. You'll have the second Zoom link there.
Now, one of my favorite topics, and it's actually tomorrow, and that's clamping things. There's all kinds of things that we've come up with over the years for clamping unusual shapes. So I'll be sharing that tomorrow, just on that one topic there, and then we've got a whole list of other issues. And then not the most important, but certainly you're going to see some different approaches to using a router table, which we use an awful lot. And the way it's used here, the way I use it here, is probably going to save you an awful lot of money. Because the way we're using a router table is very simple, very straightforward, and it doesn't involve sending Visa, kind of whatever, off to a variety of companies that make router accessories, is what it amounts to. I'll show you how to get around all that and actually come up with result.
And you're going to touch on the bench grinder as well, correct?
And we'll do the bench grinder as well. Yeah. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bench grinders in here. And there's a reason why there's 5 different ones. Not that you need 5, you can change the wheels and so on them, but because we're using them so frequently, it just makes sense to have more than 1, although you can easily get away with 1, and we'll go over that tomorrow as well.
Okay.
Okay, any last questions?
Okay,
Thank you, Michael.
same time tomorrow. 9 o'clock my time, 6 o'clock yours.